Today I'm going to rank here from the best to the worst Brazilian legend. Which one is the coolest? Which one is the most badass of them all? Or if you're young, right? Which one has the most vibe? Here, I'm going to rank them from the most famous to the lesser known, like the legend of the old lady with a saggy boob, which sounds like a joke but is real. These are the legends shown on screen. Of course, not every single one will be here, but I think the main ones will. The ranking goes from legendary to meh. I think it's pretty self-explanatory there on the screen. And what I'm going to take into consideration here in the tier list is the appearance of the being, right? How scary it can be, the creature's power, and also its legend, for example. I have some legends here that are pretty silly, while others are really macabre and scary. And the scarier it is, at least for me, the cooler the creature is. And the credits for all the artwork that will appear in the video will be in the lower left corner of the screen, or in the description. Let's start then with a legend here that isn't that well known, but it's extremely important, and it's a very powerful being. From Brazilian folklore, Boyuna, also known as the snake, is an extremely beautiful and marvelous giant snake. As you can see here, and just out of curiosity, usually Boyuna is also the father or mother of two other very famous snakes from Brazilian folklore, which are Maria Caninana and Cobra Nora. Well, the big snake would be an anaconda that fell into the water and grew to an absurd size. In a way very similar to what happened with Jormungandr in Norse mythology, except that, unlike Jormungandr, the big snake has powers of creation. I'm not kidding, okay? According to some legends, it created the waters, it created the fish, all the life around the river where it lived. And that's why I'm going to put the big snake as legendary. In fact, for me, the big snake, or Boyuna, is the most powerful legend in Brazil. Well, let's continue here then with the Capolobo, which is an extremely ugly and stinky creature, and is basically a werewolf, but it has the shape of an anteater. I've talked about the Capolobo several times here on the channel. But just to sum it up, right? When an indigenous person or an Indian gets very old, according to what they say, he would run off into the forest and end up turning into a Capolobo. And they say that when the Capolobo hunts a human being, he ends up trapping him, puts his nose on him, and according to the legend, he ends up hunting human beings. And when he catches a human, he ends up using his little anteater tongue to go into the person's head and suck out their brain as if it were a milkshake. And there's also a detail that I thought was really cool, which was told by a subscriber of the channel. I don't remember who it was, sorry about that. But according to what they say, Capolobo could also hunt a werewolf, which is a really awesome detail. But I don't think it stands up to Cobra Grande and all that, so I'll leave it at tough. And now let's move on to our Brazilian mermaid, which is Yara, who according to legend would be a really badass warrior. From a tribe where jealous men killed her and threw her into the Rio Negro, she was later bathed in moonlight. And so, she turned into a mermaid. And like all mermaids, she has that cliche of sitting and combing her hair by the water. With her beauty and voice, she hypnotizes men, kills them, and drowns them. So it's actually a pretty cool legend, right? A Brazilian mermaid. She's a copy of other legends out there, several other legends that exist around the world, okay? I think it's an okay legend, but I don't think it reaches awesome or legendary status. Now, I think Labatut is a really awesome legend, specifically because he's a werewolf pig. Even though werewolves in Brazil usually take the form of a pig, but this one in particular, the legend says he has the face of a pig or the face of a boar, like a boar. And a pig is already a kind of weird animal that, if you run into it at night, is already scary. Now, a pig that walks on two legs is strong and also loves to eat human flesh. Then, my friend, that's already a whole new level of pig. On top of that, it can smell you from far away, and it can find you in every possible way. And you don't even notice it coming because even though it's very strong and very heavy, its footsteps are really light. So because of that, and also because I really like Professor Pig from Batman, I'm going to put it in the badass tier. Well, werewolf, I think it's a really cool creature, especially since the wolf itself is already a really awesome and beautiful animal. In Brazil, as I've mentioned before, there are many werewolf breeds. I'll leave a card in the description for you to check out. There's the ghost werewolf, the werewolf who has a disease that makes his skin yellow, and the werewolf who goes to the crossroads, removes his clothes, and ties 7 knots in them. There's the 7th son of a 7th son. But here's the thing, this is where the problem comes in. Just like Yara, the werewolf isn't exactly a Brazilian legend. After all, we don't even have wolves here, right? Or at least, we don't have wolves that attack humans, like the gray wolf. So, since it's a copy, I'll put it in okay, next one. Here. It's the Mother of Gold, which, for those who don't know, is basically a golden woman. or a woman with golden hair, blonde hair, or even a golden ball. Whoever sees it ends up being led to a source of gold, to a mine full of gold. It's a very famous legend in Brazil, from the time of the gold cycle, when gold was very important to the Brazilian economy. And that's basically the legend. There's not much more to it, okay? So I'll put it in May, since it's not very scary, and the writer didn't give the character a background. Matida Pereira is one of the witches of Brazil, and according to the legend, she could turn into an owl or a crow. And honestly, I already think owls are scary animals, because even though it's very beautiful in the daylight, at night it has those shining eyes staring at you. I remember one time I was out at night when I was a kid. I stared at an owl and suddenly it flew at me, making me run like never before. That day was really scary. As if turning into an owl wasn't enough, it lands on a house at night where someone will die and keeps hooting. Just imagining it gives me chills. It's really scary. And then during the day, she'll come to collect, okay? She'll go there, knock on your door and say, so I was hooting at your house during the night because someone is going to die there, okay? If you want, you can give me a little tobacco, a little coffee. Maybe I can stop that person from dying, but if you don't give it to me, it's up to you. Go with your faith. She's almost like a gang member, right? But don't get mad or try to be a legend. Next. It's an interesting and lesser-known folklore being called the Mingusoto, a ghost from a northeastern legend, if I'm not mistaken. Even though I'm showing him with a pillowcase, that's not what he really looks like. There aren't many pictures of him. They say he has power over time and the elements. And on top of that, he has something really bizarre, which is that during the night, in the late hours, according to the legend, he ends up taking the form of a coachman. And just so you know, if you don't know what a coachman is, that's basically a guy who's driving an ox cart, right? With a wagon being pulled by oxen. And he's followed by a procession of souls who are praying there. So just imagine, you're there, waking up at night to the sound of people praying, looking out into the street and seeing a strange coachman being followed by several people holding candles is really weird. And because it's powerful and bizarre, it goes into the legendary category. The next legend is also very well known here in Brazil, and it's about the headless mule, which, according to the story, was a woman who ended up sleeping with a priest. As a result, she turns into this creature during the night. Even though the legend might seem kind of silly, it's actually pretty scary to imagine the sound of hooves and neighing in the middle of the night while you're sleeping, right? And I also remember there's an episode of Catalendas that traumatized me to this day, where they used puppets to illustrate the story of the headless mule. In the end, it said a woman who tried to discover the headless mule's identity was almost run over by it. And because of that, she went crazy for the rest of her life, and that traumatized me a bit. So that's why I'm going to leave it in okay. The next legend is about Romozinho, which I actually found out about recently when there was that episode with Gugu on Sunday. It's cool that they ended up adapting this legend. And honestly, the legend of Romozinho is a really bizarre and heavy one, and I don't even know if I can tell it here in the video. But to sum it up, it's about a kid who was so bad, but so bad that he made his father unalive his mother. And after that, his father also decided to unalive himself. If you know what I mean? So, because of that, his mother ended up cursing him, saying that neither hell nor heaven would accept him. So he kept wandering around as a ghost, bothering others for being a very scary and kind of bizarre legend. I'll put him in the tough category. I won't put him as legendary here, because I don't think he can compete with Mingusoto and Boyuna. So, tough is good enough. The next one is a being that I think appearance-wise is very scary and really tough. But he fails in marketing because his name is even worse than Tutu. Because being called Tutu is just a joke, right? But his appearance is very similar to Labatut's, with the difference that he doesn't go after just anyone, but specifically children, especially those who don't behave very well. He's basically a bogeyman. I'll rate him as okay, though the name alone would put him in the tough category. Next up is Bestafera, who, despite looking like a centaur, that's actually just one of his forms, okay? Because in reality, he's the devil himself. Diabolos, or whatever you want to call him, who walks the earth at night hunting for souls. He's accompanied by a pack of dogs that bark alongside him as he crosses the street. If you try to stop him or get in his way, you'll probably go insane. So because of that, I'm going to put him in the legendary category here. I'll put both of them here so I don't get confused. The next one is the Pink River Dolphin, which is also a very well-known legend in Brazil. But what does he do? He gets women pregnant and then leaves. He seems unable to handle fights since he always runs away, which makes me lose respect for him. Honestly, I think I could take on the pink river dolphin in a fight. You just have to cover that little hole on top of his head and he'd run out of air. That's it. The next one here is Cabeza de Cuia, and I'm not joking. That's his name. I mean, actually, that's the name he got after he died. Because in this case, it's actually very similar to the legend of Romozinho, where he supposedly kind of unalived his own mother, and because of that, he was cursed. He ended up running to the river after realizing what he had done, and ended up drowning, apparently, right? But according to what they say, he would have stayed alive until today and became a hunter of virgins. Afterwards, he got a big head and they nicknamed him Cabeza de Cuia. So, even if the legend is a bit creepy, there's no avoiding it, right guys? He has a big head and is called Cabeza de Cuia. He really goes to KK. The next ones here are the Kupendipes, who are the vampire Indians. I mean, actually vampires in quotes, right? Because they look like bats. But according to the legend, they would kill their enemies, their victims, using axes, which is kind of weird. I think it's a cool legend and all, but since there's not much about them, I'll put it in. Okay, fine. The next one is the Corpo Seco, which is also a kind of vampire, because they say it feeds on the life energy and blood of its victims. It just stands there near some trees, right? Because its body is so dry, it resembles a tree branch or trunk. When someone walks by, it grabs them and feeds on them. So that's what I think about the Corpo Seco, a really scary legend, but I don't know if it's legendary level, right? But I'll put it as scary. Well, the next legend here is Kumakonga, which is very similar to the legend of the headless mule and also to the legend of the werewolf. Because they say, right, that it would be a woman who ended up getting involved with a priest, or the seventh daughter of a seventh daughter who, during the night, ends up having her head despises. I don't know if that word exists, but anyway, her head comes off her body and goes floating around scaring people. That's pretty much all there is to it. So there's May the Encarado, who's the Brazilian vampire. He has a really fierce look because he wears a black overcoat, a black hat, and has red eyes. In other words, in terms of appearance, he has a lot of presence. And wherever he goes, they say things stop growing, animals become sterile, and so on. And, like every vampire, he can only enter a house if he's invited. That's it. He's really fierce, but I don't think he's legendary or anything, okay? So I'll put him in the fierce category, which is good enough. Well, Comadre Folozino, I'll put her here in May, okay? Because honestly, she's just another entity that also guards the forests. Like Anhanga does, Curupira does, and even Sachi does too. And really what she does differently is that she goes around whipping others, okay? She uses her long hair to whip people who set fire to the forest or go hunting. Beyond what's allowed, and just like Curupira, she also whistles whenever she's about to appear. And usually, if you want to calm her down, you can give her tobacco too. Well, the next one is Gorjala, or Gordiala, who is also a guardian of the forests. He would be a Brazilian cyclops, and apparently, according to the legend, he lives in regions that have cliffs and ravines. So he's always hopping around, but for him, that's normal. He easily jumps over those places. That's just how he is. He loves hunting humans, and when he manages to catch one, he kind of uses them as a snack, you know? He keeps them under his arm and starts tearing off little pieces and eating them like that. It's a copy of the European Cyclops. So, right, I think I'll leave it at me. The next legend is a Christian legend, and I say it's Christian because it involves Our Lady. It's the legend of Niquinho do Pastoreio, which, according to what they say, right? He was supposedly a little slave who was very badly treated by his master, and he was even placed on top of an anthill after he had, in quotes, died. But when the man returned to check on the body, he found him fully healed and standing next to Our Lady. The master then asked for forgiveness. The little shepherd boy then got on a horse and disappeared from there. It was a really cool legend from Brazil, so I'll leave it as okay, fine. The next legend is about a Pupiara, which would be the monster that appeared here during colonial times, scared a woman, and then a man came with a sword and managed to kill the monster. If this story is true, it was probably just a sea lion or something similar. So it's hard to take seriously. I'll just say laugh out loud. The next one is the legend of Pisadera, who would be a witch. When you eat too much and go to sleep on your back, she appears and sits on top of you, causing the famous sleep paralysis. And sometimes she even makes you end up dying by choking on your own vomit. An extremely wonderful legend. What a character. But I don't think it comes close to the ones in Bravo or even the ones in Legendary. The next one is the legend of the Thunderbird of Brazil, which is Rondolo, who, according to some versions, would work for Tupã. and just flapping its wings can cause monstrous storms. And they say that to get rid of Rondelot, you would need a really powerful priest. So because of that, I'm going to put it in Bravo. The next legend is about the Bicho Homem, a giant from Brazilian folklore said to destroy mountains with one punch. And on top of that, according to some tribes, if he moved from where he is, in other words, if he went to the indigenous villages, it would be the end of the world. Of course, that's probably an exaggeration, saying he would wipe out the whole tribe, the village and all. But as they said, the end of the world, right? I'll put it in legendary. The next legend is the legend of Papa Figo, who is basically the boogeyman, right? He kidnaps disobedient children and all that and devours their livers because, according to the legend, he had a disease that could only be cured by eating liver. It's a boogeyman legend, right? So he doesn't really do much. I'm going to leave this next one in the May category. I'll be honest with you, okay? It was supposed to be a legend I found called, if I'm not mistaken, Maria de Navalha or something like that. It would be a legend about a woman who died with her mouth cut and all that, and she would come back to haunt people. I couldn't find more about this legend, so I think it's fake and we'll leave it in the LOL category. If anyone knows it, please comment. I'd appreciate it. The next legend is about Maria Carinana and Cobra Norato, who are the children of Boyuna. They would also be two gigantic snakes, each with different personalities. Maria Carinana liked to sink boats, and Cobra Norato liked to go around getting people pregnant. But aside from that, he was a good guy and even ended up defeating his own sister to protect the people there and the local population. It's a really cool legend too, but I don't think it comes close to Rondelot Encarado or some of the other legends that are higher up there. Well, the next one here is Tibungi, also known as Sachi, from Minas Gerais, who is basically the same as Sachi. But he kidnaps people and also has an arrow that catches fire in the middle of his head. There, I once found that this arrow allows him to control the dead and hypnotize people. But since I couldn't find that information again, it was probably fake too. So I'll put him in the okay category because I think his look with an arrow in his head is really cool. Oh, while I was editing, I realized I missed the part where I talk. Pai D'Amato is a legendary giant who guards the arrows, similar to Bicho Homem, but without the end of the world aspect. That's why I made him legendary. And there's another one there too, which is a serpent that I put on the tier list, and I don't even remember why. And that's actually why I put it in the LOL category. The next one is Tiritirimanha, which is basically a crocodile that stays underground and holds up the whole earth. And they say that when it moves, it causes some tremors, which is pretty wild. Now, we've reached the legend of the old lady I mentioned to you, which was a legend about an old woman with sagging breasts. But I lied, actually. It's a legend about an old woman who has only one breast. And I hope YouTube doesn't censor this video, and this legend is really bizarre, if I'm not mistaken. It's a legend from Piauí that says on the roads, there was an old woman who had large breasts. I mean, one large breast. And she forced people there to, how can I put this, suckle from her breast. And she made the person do that until they simply couldn't take it anymore. Honestly, I can't help but laugh at this legend. Come on, how is it possible? An old lady walking the roads, forcing people to breastfeed? It's complicated, right? The next one is the legend of Iyengar, who is also a guardian of the forest, or, more specifically, of the grasslands. If I'm not mistaken, even though nowadays we understand Iyengar as being an underworld god, actually originally, he would be the spirit of a white deer, or rather a spirit that takes the form of a white deer. He protects the forest there from arsonists, and also from those who end up going against the animal's offspring or doing harm to them. He can be seen, and he can also create illusions. In other words, he's a lot like Curupira. I'll put him in the meh category. Okay, now, good. Boitata, who is also a guardian of the forests. According to the legend, Boitata is a serpent that, when a local flood happened, took advantage of it to devour the eyes of other animals. Because of that, he ended up being punished so that now the eyes would appear all over his body. He would also be forced to always protect the forests and the other animals. And because of that, he got a really cool form, which is a giant snake that catches fire and has several eyes spread all over its body. In other words, he's fierce, no doubt about it. Now, the next one is also another bogeyman, which is the Cobra Cabriola, which is also a bogeyman, just like several other creatures here in the video. But this one in particular is really creepy because it's a goat that walks on two legs and chases children. It's really awesome. I mean, you get what I mean? Now let's move on to what might be the most stylish legend in Brazilian folklore. Actually, not the legend, but the most stylish creature, which is the Boca de Aurelia, because he dresses like a loan shark and wears a Panama hat, a stylish white suit, and on top of that, he has gold teeth. And in this case, he goes after some drunk people who are wandering alone at night, and he keeps chasing them until they pass out. And that's basically his role. His job isn't really that tough or legendary, but because of his style, he gets an okay now, the Cuca, even though Montero Lobato made the Cuca into a giant alligator. Actually, she would be a witch and also a bogeyman who kidnaps children to make some kind of soup and then devours them. So it's a very nostalgic creature, but it's not like, wow, what an amazing legend, what a cool legend. It's more of a legend for nostalgia, okay? The Curupira is the same way, right? He's also a guardian of the forest who ends up chasing those who set fires or mistreat the young, especially animals. But it's not that great of a legend either, right? The Sachi. So I would put him in the awesome category. But there's something about his legend, which is that he's supposed to be a goblin, right? He ends up bothering people, hiding things around the house, stealing food, letting food burn or freeze, and so on. It's not really that thing of, wow, what an amazing legend and all that. On top of that, there's the fact that you can kidnap Sachi by taking his cap and make him work for you, right? So that's how Kaipora is, right? Even though we think that Kaipora and Curupira are different creatures, actually they're the same creature, just from different regions, right? In Maranhão in the south, Curupira is known as Kaipora. To learn more about Curupira, check out the video here on the channel. There's also one about Sachi, which I'll leave in the card and in the description. And that's pretty much it, right? I think that's good enough. Well, I think that if you've watched the video up to this point, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Do you think I missed any creature on this list? Leave it in the comments, all right? And I'll see you next time.